All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today. We're going to be talking about how living together impacts mental health. And get this, we've got a ton of research and expert opinions on this. It's way more complicated than you might think.
You know what's super interesting? How connected our living spaces and mental well-being actually are. Living with a partner can seriously boost your mood, but it really depends on the kind of relationship you're building in that shared space.
So it's not just about having the same address. I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What really makes the difference?
Picture this. You've had a rough day, you come home, and there's someone there for you, ready to listen and offer support. That feeling of security, of belonging, it's powerful. It's like a shield against stress and loneliness. And research backs this up. Living with a supportive partner can actually make your mental well-being better.
So, like a built-in emotional support system. Sounds pretty great. But okay, let's be real. Even the best relationships have their tough moments, right? Sharing a bathroom, figuring out finances, just being around each other all the time. I imagine that can create tension even when you're totally in love.
You're spot on. Sharing a living space, even with someone you love, adds a whole new layer of complexity to the relationship. It's like suddenly you're not just dealing with your own stuff, you're managing a whole ecosystem together.
An ecosystem, I like that. So what are some of the common traps couples fall into in this cohabitation ecosystem? Besides, the occasional argument over the toothpaste cap.
Think of it this way. Every single decision, from who takes out the trash to how you spend your weekends, becomes something you have to negotiate. And if those negotiations go wrong, even little things can turn into huge sources of stress and resentment.
Makes sense. Like that game Jenga, pull out the wrong block and the whole tower collapses. So what are some of those wrong blocks that can really mess things up for a couple living together?
One of the biggest culprits is unresolved conflict. When disagreements just sit there and fester, they create this underlying tension that affects both partners' mental health. It's like carrying around an invisible weight.
Ugh, I get that feeling. It's like when you forget to pay a bill, it just hangs over you. So is it all about learning to fight fair? Or is there more to it than that?
Learning to communicate well is definitely key, but there's also something that often gets overlooked. Emotional labor. It's all the unseen mental work that usually falls more on one partner.
Break that down for me. What does emotional labor actually look like when you're sharing a living space?
It's all the stuff that happens behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly, remembering birthdays, scheduling appointments, making sure there's food in the fridge, anticipating everyone's needs. It's often unnoticed, but it takes a lot of mental energy. And if one person feels like they're always doing it, it can lead to burnout.
Wow, that's a great point. It's like being the project manager of your own relationship, but without getting any recognition for it. No wonder it can lead to resentment. So, how do couples stop these everyday stresses from turning into huge mental health problems? Is it all about communication?
Communication is a big part of it, yeah, but it's not just about talking. It's about actually understanding your partner's needs and expectations.
So more like active listening and empathy.
Exactly. And it's about being honest about your own needs, too. No mind reading aloud. What if you set up a weekly relationship check-in where you each share something you appreciate about the other and one area where you need more support?
Oh, I love that. A designated time to connect and get on the same page, like a relationship tune-up. But what about those deeper issues, like an imbalance in emotional labor? How do you deal with that?
Well, it starts with awareness. Often the person doing most of the emotional labor doesn't even realize how much they're taking on, or they feel bad about asking for help.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to
Yeah.
take care of yourself to be a good partner, right?
Exactly. Self-care isn't selfish. It's crucial for a healthy relationship. And part of self-care is setting boundaries and being clear about what you need.
So it's not about fixing the other person. It's about building a system where both partners feel supported and empowered.
That's it. It's about teamwork, not martyrdom. And that leads us to another big thing about cohabitation: boundaries. Boundaries are so important when you're sharing a living space, but it's a concept that can be hard to grasp. It's not about putting up walls. It's more like setting clear guidelines for how you interact and respect each other's space, both physically and emotionally.
I see how this all connects now. Communication lays the groundwork, then boundaries provide the structure for a healthy cohabitation ecosystem. But how do you actually set those boundaries? Is it as simple as saying, hey, this is my side of the closet, stay out?
It definitely helps to be clear about physical boundaries like personal space and stuff, but it goes beyond that. It's about respecting each other's time, energy, and emotional needs.
So, like, if one partner is an introvert who needs some alone time after work to recharge, The other partner respects that need and doesn't take it personally.
Exactly. And the introvert communicates that need clearly and doesn't make their partner feel rejected. It's all about finding a balance that works for both of you.
And I imagine finances can be a huge boundary issue for couples. It's one thing to split a dinner bill, but merging bank accounts and dealing with shared expenses is a whole other level.
Absolutely. Money often comes with a lot of emotional baggage, so it's crucial to be open and willing to compromise when you're talking about finances.
Okay, let's get practical for a minute. Any tips for couples trying to navigate shared finances? Besides, therapy and those couples yoga retreats.
Well, first off, there's no one right way to do it. Some couples go all in and merge everything, others keep things separate and split expenses. The key is finding a system that feels fair and works for both partners.
I bet a lot of arguments could be avoided just by being upfront about your financial habits and what you expect from the start. Like, are you a saver or a spender? Do you prefer experiences or buying things?
You got it. Open and honest communication is key. And it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing conversation as your finances and goals change over time.
So regular money dates, like Netflix and chill, but for your bank statements.
Exactly. But seriously, making time to go over your finances together, even if it's just 15 minutes each week, can make a big difference.
All right, money talk over. Let's move on to another potentially tricky area, chores. Is there a magic formula for dividing those up fairly? Asking for a friend who may or may not have passive-aggressively rearranged the dishwasher a few times.
I feel you on that. Dividing chores can be tough, especially when you factor in different preferences and tolerance levels for things like clutter or cleanliness. The first step, as always, is communication. What tasks does each person like or dislike? Are there things one person is just better at?
I'm picturing a shore draft, like in fantasy football. I'll take laundry if you handle the grocery shopping.
I love it. But really, finding a system that works takes flexibility and being willing to adjust as things change. Maybe you switch off weeks, assign tasks based on who's good at what, or even create a point system for different chores.
A point system, that's next level adulting. But I imagine even with the system, there's still room for resentment if one person feels like they're doing more than their share.
That's where cognitive load comes in. It's not just about physically doing the dishes, it's about the mental effort it takes to remember to buy dish soap, load the dishwasher, and make sure it runs before bed.
Wow, never thought of it that way. It's like that never-ending mental to-do list. No wonder it can be so draining.
Right. So even if you're splitting chores evenly, if one person is always the one remembering, planning, and delegating, that's an imbalance in cognitive load that can lead to burnout.
So how do you fix that? Do you have to make a shared Google Calendar for every single household task?
It doesn't have to be that complicated. Sometimes just acknowledging what your partner is doing can make a big difference. Saying something like, hey, I know you're always the one who remembers to buy toilet paper. Thanks for that. Is there anything I can do to help out?
That's simple but powerful. Just recognizing their effort and offering support. I love it.
And sometimes it's about giving responsibility to the other person. Instead of always being the one to buy dog food, let your partner take charge of that.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to household management. But before we get lost in spreadsheets and short charts, let's talk about something a bit more fun. How do you keep your individual identities when you're sharing a living space? How do you make sure the we doesn't completely overshadow the me?
Great question. It's easy to get caught up in the togetherness of living together, but having your own interests and passions is crucial for long-term happiness and a healthy relationship.
It's like those two trees growing next to each other. They might share the same soil and sunlight, but their branches grow in different directions, each with their own unique shape and pattern.
That's such a great analogy. It perfectly describes individuality within a shared space. It's about knowing that you're still a whole person even though you're part of a couple.
So how do you encourage each other to hold on to those separate identities? Is it as simple as scheduling me time on the calendar?
Scheduling time for yourself is a good start, but it's more than that. It's about supporting your partner's hobbies, time with their friends, things that make them happy, even if you don't necessarily share those interests.
So it's not about becoming the same person. It's about celebrating what makes each person unique and special in the relationship.
Exactly. It's about respecting each other's individuality and making room for both personal growth and shared experiences. And sometimes that means saying, hey, I know you love going to concerts. Go have fun with your friends. I'll be here relaxing with a good book.
That's such a small gesture, but it means a lot. It's about showing your partner that you support them and trust them to have fun without you. And speaking of fun, I think it's time we addressed the big question: romance. How do you keep the spark alive when you're surrounded by dirty laundry and unwashed dishes?
Ah, the age-old question. It's easy to let the everyday stuff overshadow romance, but making time for fun and connection is so important for a thriving relationship.
So, any practical tips for couples trying to add a little more excitement to their routine? Besides the usual candlelit dinners and bubble baths, I mean.
Well, remember that romance doesn't have to be grand or expensive. It's about those little everyday things that show you care and appreciate your partner.
Like leaving a cute note on the bathroom mirror or surprising them with their favorite coffee.
Exactly. Sometimes it's as simple as putting your phone down, looking at each other, and really listening to what your partner is saying. Being present is incredibly romantic.
That's so true. It's about making each other feel seen and heard in the midst of all the craziness of daily life. But what about designated date nights? Are those still important when you're basically living in a constant sleepover?
Date nights are absolutely still important, even if you live together. It's about making time for connection and enjoyment without the distractions of chores, work, and all that stuff.
Like hitting the pause button on real life and just focusing on each other.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It could be as simple as cooking together, playing a board game, or going for a walk in the park. The key is to find things you both enjoy that help you connect and de-stress together.
Okay, we've covered communication, boundaries, finances, chores, individual identities, and even romance. I'm feeling pretty confident about this whole cohabitation thing now.
That's great to hear. But before you become a cohabitation guru, there's one more important thing I want to mention.
Ooh, suspense. Tell me more.
Building a healthy and happy life together takes time. It's a journey, not a destination.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of harmony. It's about constantly learning, adapting, and growing together.
Exactly. There will be challenges, disagreements, and frustrating moments along the way. That's just part of being in a relationship, whether you're sharing a toothbrush holder or living miles apart.
So the key is to approach those challenges with a spirit of collaboration, empathy, and a good sense of humor.
Absolutely. And remember, there's no shame in asking for professional help when you need it.
We've talked about all the pieces you need for a good relationship while living together: communication, boundaries, a little romance. But sometimes, even when you're trying your best, things can get tricky. That's where having a professional help can really make a difference.
Yeah, think of it like having a GPS for your relationship when you've taken a wrong turn. A therapist can guide you back on track and help you reach your destination,
Eh,
a healthier and happier partnership.
I like the GPS analogy. But let's face it, there's still a kind of stigma around going to therapy, right? Like, it means you've messed up or your relationship is over.
You're right that stigma does exist, but it's really outdated. Seeking help is actually a sign of strength and self-awareness. It means you're willing to put in the work for your relationship and prioritize your well-being, both individually and as a couple.
So it's more like taking your relationship in for a tune-up like you would with a car. You wouldn't wait until your engine blew up to get an oil change, right?
Exactly. And just like a mechanic can spot problems you might not even know about, a therapist can help you figure out the patterns, dynamics, and underlying issues that might be causing conflict in your relationship.
So when is it time to call in the relationship mechanic, so to speak? What are some signs that couples should think about getting professional help?
One of the biggest red flags is when you keep having the same arguments over and over again and can't seem to resolve them on your own. Or if those arguments get really intense and emotional quickly, it might be time to get a different perspective.
It's like being trapped in a revolving door. You keep going around in circles, but never actually get anywhere.
Another sign is feeling constantly unhappy or unfulfilled in the relationship. If you're always feeling resentful, lonely, or emotionally distant, it's important to address those feelings before they grow into bigger problems.
It's like a slow leak in a tire. Might not seem like a big deal at first, but eventually you'll be stuck on the side of the road.
And of course, if either you or your partner are dealing with mental health issues like anxiety or depression, getting professional help can be incredibly helpful. A therapist can provide support, coping strategies, and resources to work through those individual challenges, which can then improve the relationship too.
So it's not just about fixing the relationship itself, it's about supporting each other's overall well-being.
That's right. It's about creating a safe space where both partners feel heard, understood, and able to take care of themselves, both individually and together.
Okay, so let's say you've decided to go for it and see a therapist. How do you even find one that's a good fit for you as a couple? It's not as easy as ordering takeout, where you just pick something that looks good on the menu.
Uh-huh. True. Finding the right therapist is a little more involved. You want to look for someone who specializes in couples therapy and has experience with the specific issues you're dealing with. For example, if communication is a struggle, you might look for a therapist who's really good at teaching communication skills.
So it's like finding a specialist for your relationship, just like you would for a medical condition.
Exactly. It's also important to find a therapist you both feel comfortable with. You should feel like you can trust them and that they understand the unique dynamics of your relationship.
And don't be afraid to try out different therapists before you settle on one.
Absolutely. Therapy is a partnership, so you want to make sure you're both on the same page with the therapist's approach and style.
Well, this deep dive has been eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what it means to live together and how important it is to prioritize mental health in relationships.
I'm glad you found it helpful.
Yeah.
Remember, living together can be a really rewarding experience, but like any relationship, it takes effort, communication, and a willingness to grow together.
So to wrap things up, if you're thinking about moving in with your partner, or if you're already living together and hitting some bumps in the road, remember, you're not alone. There are resources out there, and getting help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
And don't forget, even with all the challenges that come with sharing your life with someone, don't lose sight of the joy and connection that comes with it.
That's a great reminder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into cohabitation and mental health. We hope you learned something valuable that can help you create a more fulfilling and supportive relationship. Until next time, take care.